I think anyone who heard about that awful stabbing at the school in Shenzhen really hits you in the gut. Yeah, especially for us parents. It's like this primal thing, wanting to protect your kids, trying to make sense of something so senseless. And even though the news moves on, you're right to be concerned about how people are reacting to it. It's so easy to get caught up in those immediate feelings, looking for someone to blame. But that's not what today's deep dive is about. We're going deeper, unpacking all this with a vlog by AI. He's a Chinese father, actually living in Japan now, which gives him, well, a really unique perspective.
Yeah, and it's striking how Hunter himself felt this pressure to kind of zero in on anti-Japanese sentiment.
Hmm, almost like he felt obligated to play into that whole narrative.
Exactly. He talks about it in his vlog, this almost, I don't know, suffocating pressure from his online audience, the comments, the algorithm, that constant need to stay relevant. It shows how easily we can get pulled into echo chambers, especially online. Algorithms basically feed us more of what we've already clicked on, what we've engaged with. I'm not sure how familiar you are with the term algorithmic bias.
Oh, totally. It's like social media just knows exactly what outrage to throw at you next.
Exactly. It creates this feedback loop. The information we see is curated based on, our past behavior and what these platforms want us to see. I mean, it's designed to keep us on the platform, keep us engaged, but it can really limit how we understand complicated issues, just like this tragedy.
And that's what's so powerful about C's vlog, right? He catches himself. He realizes that focusing only on anti-Japanese feelings, while maybe a factor, ignores a much bigger, much more troubling pattern here.
He makes a really important point. This wasn't an isolated incident. He ties it to, well, a whole bunch of similar violent acts in China. Like there was that attack on a kindergarten in Billy City last year, and that bus driver who, if you remember, intentionally crashed after an argument with someone on the bus. It's scary. There's this unsettling common thread running through these events.
Mhm.
Intense societal pressures, zero support systems, and people pushed to desperate, often terrifying actions.
And that's where EQ uses that analogy, right? The pressure cooker. He's talking about how China's economy is struggling, the lack of any real safety net, how those traditional family and community supports are eroding. It's like this boiling pot ready to explode.
Yeah, it really is a perfect analogy. It gets at this complex thing, atomization, which sociologists have been studying forever. Basically, it's about how in modern society, especially in places like China, going through such rapid change, people can feel incredibly isolated.
Alone.
Yeah, like they're just adrift, all these pressures and no one to turn to.
And DX seems to be saying that that isolation, that feeling of being completely alone, that's what really breeds despair and in some cases, sadly, violence.
Exactly. And his perspective, having lived in both China and Japan, it becomes even more interesting here. He really pushes back against the simple narrative of just blaming everything on anti-Japanese sentiment.
Which honestly is the easy way out. Find an enemy, point the finger. It's much harder to look at ourselves.
Right, and he's not saying those feelings aren't real. He's saying they're being used, amplified in this pressure cooker environment. He uses this example of a small business owner driven to bankruptcy. This guy lost everything, and he lashed out, attacked a local government office. It wasn't really about politics, though. It was about this deep sense of hopelessness, the lack of any kind of support.
And that's what makes this whole conversation so unsettling. It's not about pointing at one group or finding some easy solution. It's about this much bigger problem, this systemic issue of despair and how it can show itself in such unpredictable and honestly terrifying ways.
And he even admits that even if everyone suddenly became aware of this, even if everyone in China watched his vlog, these underlying issues are still incredibly difficult to fix.
So where do you even start? It feels, I don't know, overwhelming.
Yeah, it's a lot. Aisha doesn't try to give easy answers, which I actually find refreshing.
It's like he's saying this isn't just about, one event, one school. This is bigger, a societal problem, something a hashtag or a new law can't really fix.
Right, exactly. And near the end of his vlog, Adra brings up this, well, chilling point, I guess you could say. He says, think about this pressure cooker, this feeling of hopelessness that seems to be everywhere. Now imagine it's not just aimed at Japan or any one group for that matter. It becomes this kind of unfocused rage, this despair that could latch onto anything or anyone, really.
It's like, that's what's so scary about it. And we're seeing it happen everywhere, aren't we?
Yeah.
This kind of eruption of anger, violence.
Yeah.
You can't predict it. You can't reason with it.
It's a deeply unsettling thought, and Trying doesn't try to sugarcoat it, but he leaves his viewers, he leaves us, with this really important question. How do we, even in our own little corners of the world, start to address these huge problems? How do we rebuild hope, a sense of shared humanity, in a system that often seems designed to, destroy it?
So what does that even look like? I mean, practically speaking, it can feel so overwhelming.
It is. He doesn't act like he has all the answers, but he wants us to at least consider something. What if, instead of getting sucked into the outrage, the blame game, we just acknowledge that we're all human? What if we focused on making our own communities stronger, building bridges, no matter how small? It's a call to action that, well, it goes way beyond China.
I think so, yeah. It's not a them problem, it's a human problem, which means it needs human solutions. So, as we wrap up this deep dive, let's really think about that question asks, what can we do, even if it seems small, to start building hope? How do we release some of the pressure, right? Because even the smallest act of empathy, of just connecting with someone, it can make a difference. And you never know, maybe those small acts could turn into something much bigger.